March 15, 1783. The Revolutionary War is technically over. The British have surrendered. But inside a freezing wooden hall in Newburgh, New York, the American dream is about to die. These aren't enemy soldiers. These are George Washington's own officers. They haven't been paid in months. Their families are starving. Congress has ignored them. And now a secret letter is circulating through the camp. The whisper is getting louder. They don't want a democracy anymore. They want to march on Philadelphia. They want to overthrow the government. They want to make their general a king. The meeting was supposed to be secret. But then he walks in. General George Washington wasn't invited. He wasn't supposed to be there. He walks to the front of the room. The tension is suffocating. These men revere him, but they are ready to mutiny. If Washington gives the nod, the United States becomes a military dictatorship right here, right now. If he refuses, they might kill him. He tries to read a prepared speech, but the words are swimming. He stops. Washington reaches into his coat and pulls out something his men have never seen him wear, a pair of reading glasses. He looks up at his angry, betrayed soldiers and says the only words that matter. "Gentlemen, you will permit me to put on my spectacles, for I have not only grown gray but almost blind in the service of my country." The anger in the room vanished. They saw their invincible leader admit he was broken, old, and tired just like them. Some of the hardest men in history began to weep openly. The mutiny ended. The coup was over. With one sentence, Washington saved the Republic. We think of him as a statue, a face on a dollar bill. But the real George Washington was a man of secrets. A reckless youth who started a world war by mistake. A spy master who used invisible ink to trick an empire. And a president who was hated as much as he was loved. This is not the history class version. This is the truth behind the legend. Before he was the father of his country, George Washington was a 22-year-old walking disaster. In 1754, he wasn't fighting for freedom. He was fighting for the British Empire, serving the very king he would one day overthrow. And his very first mission? It wasn't a hero's journey. It was a diplomatic nightmare. Deep in the woods of Pennsylvania, Washington and his men stumbled upon a small group of French soldiers camping in a glen. Washington was young. He was eager to prove himself. He didn't wait to talk. He didn't ask questions. He gave the order. Fire. The skirmish lasted 15 minutes. The French commander lay dying. He tried to explain that he was on a diplomatic mission. But before Washington could understand, his Native American ally walked up to the wounded Frenchman and cracked his skull open. Washington was horrified. But it got worse. The French army hunted him down and surrounded him at a makeshift fort. It was pouring rain. His gunpowder was wet. Men were dying. Washington had no choice but to surrender. The French handed him a document to sign. It was written in French. Washington could not read French. He signed it thinking it was a standard parole. He was wrong. He had just signed a confession admitting to the assassination of a French diplomat. This document was the spark. Because of Washington's signature, France and Britain went to war. The father of America started his career by accidentally setting the world on fire. Flash forward 20 years. 1776. Washington is now general of the Continental Army, but the global gossip of the time said the war would be over in a month. He lost New York. He lost at Brandywine. Washington realized a hard truth. If he fought the British fair and square, America would die, so he stopped fighting like a general. He started fighting like a spy. He became the old fox. Washington realized that information was more lethal than gunpowder. He created the Culper Ring. This wasn't just military scouting. This was high-stakes espionage. Washington was obsessed with secrecy. He spent over 10% of his entire military budget on spies. He didn't even tell Congress the names of his agents. He referred to them only by numbers. Washington himself was codenamed 711. Washington was a master of deception. He introduced sympathetic stain, invisible ink. His spies would write ordinary letters but between the lines. Using a secret chemical, they wrote the troop movements of the British Army. And then there was the gossip of the laundry line. Anna Strong, a brave woman on Long Island, used her wash to signal the spies. A black petticoat meant a message was ready. While the British soldiers walked right past her garden, she was coordinating the downfall of their empire. Because of this network, Washington planted fake documents for the British to find. He tricked them into thinking he was attacking New York while he secretly moved his entire army south. The British never saw it coming. They thought they were fighting a farmer. They didn't realize they were fighting a master illusionist. When the British finally surrendered in 1781, their general refused to even look at Washington. He couldn't believe he had been beaten by a rebel. Washington had won the war. But the battle for the soul of America was just starting. And as we are about to see, governing a country is much harder than fighting for one. The war was over. The British were gone. But now, Washington faced an opponent he could not fight on a battlefield. Politics. In 1789, he was unanimously elected the first president. But the gossip from his private letters tells a different story. He didn't want the job. He told a friend that taking the presidency felt like marching to his doom. He knew that every single thing he did would set a precedent for the next 1,000 years. If he made one mistake, America might fail, and the criticism started immediately. Washington held formal parties called levees. He would stand in a black velvet suit, wearing a ceremonial sword, and bow to guests without shaking hands. The press, specifically newspapers funded by his own Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, attacked him relentlessly. They called him a royalist. They claimed he secretly wanted to be King George I. They mocked his stiff manners. The man who had saved the country was now being targeted by it. But his cabinet was worse. Washington had to referee the biggest feud in American history, Hamilton versus Jefferson. Hamilton wanted a strong central bank. Jefferson wanted a nation of farmers. They despised each other. They argued every day. And Washington was stuck in the middle, trying to keep the United States from splitting apart before it even began. He was the glue holding the country together. But the stress was destroying his health, literally. In the middle of his term, Washington developed a severe life-threatening illness. He almost passed away. For weeks, the government stopped. Straw was laid down on the streets outside his house to quiet the noise of carriages. The nation held its breath. He survived, but he was never the same. He was tired. He was hurt by the insults. But there is one secret that Washington tried very hard to keep hidden. A story that doesn't fit the hero narrative. But there is one secret that Washington tried very hard to keep hidden. A story that doesn't fit the hero narrative. And this secret had a name. Ona Judge. Ona was not just any enslaved woman. She was the personal maid to the First Lady, Martha Washington. She lived in the president's house in Philadelphia. But in 1796, Ona discovered a terrifying secret. She found out that Martha was planning to give her away as a wedding gift to her granddaughter, a woman known for her bad temper. Ona realized she would never be free. So, while the Washingtons were sitting down to eat a quiet dinner, Ona simply walked out the front door. She blended into the crowd of free black residents in Philadelphia, boarded a ship called the Nancy, and vanished to New Hampshire. When Washington found out, he was furious. The man who fought a revolution for liberty could not accept that his own property had claimed it for herself. For the last 3 years of his life, he relentlessly hunted her down. He didn't just send letters. He sent a customs agent to kidnap her and bring her back by force if necessary. When the agent finally cornered her in New Hampshire, Ona stood her ground. She told him, "I am free now, and I choose to remain so." She outsmarted the most powerful man in America. She married, had children, and died a free woman. It is a dark chapter, but it reminds us that Washington was a man of his time, complex and flawed, not a god. In 1797, Washington did the unthinkable again. He could have been president for life. The people wanted a king, but he stepped down. He handed power back to the people. Before he left, he published his farewell address, a final warning to the future. He warned us that political parties would destroy our unity. He warned us to stay out of foreign wars. Basically, he warned us against doing everything we are doing today. Then, he went home to his farm. 2 years later, the end came. It wasn't a bullet that killed the general. It was a throat infection. The doctors tried to save him by draining 40% of his blood, but it only made him weaker. Lying in his bed, struggling to breathe, Washington had one final, terrified request. He was terrified of being buried alive. He whispered to his secretary, "Do not let my body be put into the vault in less than 3 days after I am dead." He died as he lived, in control. His last act was to check his own pulse. When it stopped, his hand simply fell. The king was dead. But the republic lived. Washington built the house. But the next president was about to buy the backyard. Next time on Gossip, Thomas Jefferson. The man who wrote all men are created equal while owning 600 slaves, and the secret illegal deal that doubled the size of America. Subscribe so you don't miss the truth.